Okay, so this is part 2 of 2526. Yeah, we are finishing just the examples of factoring these polynomials in standard form. So remember, we have 5 steps. The first one is to always look for greatest common factor. So on number 5 here, I'm first going to highlight A, B, and C. It's always a good habit to get into looking at which one's A, which one's B, and which one's C, because you use them all in different places. So I have A, B, and C highlighted. Now I look to see, is there a common factor between 2, -5, and -7? There's not. There is no greatest common factor for us to pull out because the greatest common factor is just 1. So my first step, whoa, I did not switch back to my pen. I'm still on highlighter. So my first step, there's no greatest common factor to pull out because the greatest common factor of 2, -5, and -7 is just 1. So step 2, now I want to multiply A and C. Well, A is 2, right? The yellow number that we highlighted was 2 times -7, which is our C value. Okay, what do I get when I multiply these together? I get -14. Okay, so that's step 2. Step 3, we want the factors of -14. So what can I multiply to get -14? Now this is a little bit different than our other problems because our number is negative. So to get a negative number, we have to multiply one negative and one positive together, right? So when we are writing down these factors, I want us to think of one of them has to be negative, one of them has to be positive, all right? Because that's the only way we can get -14 as an answer. So to multiply to get just 14 in general, I can do 1 and 14, or I can do 2 and 7. Now remember, in both of these combinations, one of the numbers has to be negative and one of them will have to be positive. Okay, but right now I know 1 times 14 gives me 14 and 2 times 7 is 14. Okay, so that's part of step 3. The next part is to say, how am I going to combine these to get -5, right? Because we want to add up to get our B value, which is -5. So first of all, is there any possible combination of 1 and 14 that will give me -5? Can I subtract 1 from 14 to get -5? Can I add them together to get -5? Nope. There's no possible way to combine 1 and 14 to get -5. But there is a way to get -5 out of 2 and 7. So this comes back to where we know one of these numbers is going to be negative. And which one is the question. So because the number we're trying to get is negative, we're trying to get -5, that means the bigger number out of these two is going to be negative. So that means that our 7 is going to be negative and the other number will be positive. So we can see -7 plus 2 is -5. So that was step 3. Step 4 is rewrite our trinomial. So we have 2x squared, but instead of writing -5x, I'm going to write I'm going to rearrange it just a little bit. I'm going to rearrange it up here a little bit too. It doesn't matter which way you write it, but just for it to be easier for us in the long run, I'm going to write the positive number first. So 2 minus 7 is -5. That's the same thing we had written before, only now when I rewrite my trinomial and I write plus 2x minus 7x, and then at the end we have -7, this is just going to be a lot prettier for us. So we replaced -5x with 2x minus 7x. Okay. Step 5 is to do our grouping. So cut that right in half there. We have 2x squared plus 2x. The greatest common factor here is 2x. And then what's left? We have x plus 1. The greatest common factor of negative 7x minus 7 is negative 7. And what I'm left with is x plus 1. We call that binomial our common binomial, and then our greatest common factors out front. So my final answer, we have 2x minus 7, our greatest common factors combined, and then we have x plus 1 was our common binomial. So you can see our final answer. And that's it for number 5. Let's do number 6. Number 6, I want to highlight my A, my B, and my C. Okay. Step 1, look for any greatest common factors. In this problem, there is not one. There's no number I can divide into negative 4, negative 8, and 5. The only thing that goes into all of them is 1. So there's no greatest common factor. So step 2, multiply A and C. So multiply negative 4 times 5. Remember, 5 is our blue C value from up above. Negative 4 was our A value from up above. If I multiply these together, I get negative 20. So now this is a little bit like number 5. Since we ended up with a negative number, when we look for factors, we have to remember that one of those numbers is going to have to be negative. That's the only way we can get negative 20 as an answer. So step 3, we want the factors of negative 20. What can I multiply to get negative 20? Well, we already know negative 4 and 5. I'm just going to write 4 times 5 gives me 20. 1 and 20 gives me 20. 2 and 10 give me 20. I think that's it. Yep, there's no other factors, just those 3 combinations. Now remember, if I'm using 4 and 5, one of them would have to be negative to get negative 20. Same with 1 and 20, one of them would have to be negative, and 2 and 10, one of them would have to be negative. So this is where that comes in. We want to figure out which combination am I going to be able to use to get negative 8. Is there any way I can combine 4 and 5 to get negative 8? No. What about 1 and 20? Nope. 2 and 10? Yes. I can combine 2 and 10 in a way to get negative 8. Now, kind of like in our number 5 problem, our number that we're trying to find is negative 8, which tells me that my bigger number is negative. So that means that 2 is positive and 10 is negative. So we have 2 minus 10 will give me negative 8. So now to step 4. Rewrite the trinomial. So negative 4x squared. Instead of negative 8x, I'm going to write plus 2x minus 10x, and then plus 5. So I replaced negative 8 with 2 and negative 10. And then finally, step 5, grouping. So cut that in half. The greatest common factor of negative 4x squared and 2x is negative 2x. Because that number out front was negative 4, so our greatest common factor is negative. And we're left with x minus 1. The greatest common factor of negative 10x and 5 is negative 5. because remember, negative 10x, that's the number out front, it's negative, so our greatest common factor is negative. And we're left with, oh, I wrote the other one incorrectly. And if you caught that, good. When I wrote this part left in our parentheses, I left out a number. We are left with 2x minus 1. And over here we have 2x minus 1. So our common binomial is the same. Our greatest common factors are going to join together. And we have our final answer. Okay. See if you can try numbers 7 and 8 on your own. Pause the video, give them a try, and then come back and watch the solution. So we have on 7, I'm going to highlight A, B, and C. Always a good idea to start there. Step 1, look for your greatest common factor. On number 7, there is not one. Okay, so step 2, we want to multiply A and C. A is 3, C is 2. That gives us 6. If you're lost, remember we grabbed A and C from up above. Step 3, we want the factors of 6. So in numbers 5 and 6, because our answer was negative, I told you that one of our factors had to be negative. This number is positive 6, which tells me that both of my factors will either be positive or both of them will be negative. Okay. So our factors of 6, what can I multiply to get 6? Well, I know 3 times 2 is 6. We just saw that in step 2. But also, 1 times 6 is 6. So I want to figure out which combination is going to help me get to my B value, which is 7. I cannot combine 3 and 2 in any way to get 7, but I can combine 1 and 6 to get 7. I just add them together. 1 plus 6. Okay, so that's our step 3. We found two numbers that multiply to get 6, but add up to get 7. So now step 4, replace 7 with 1 and 6. So rewrite our trinomial, 3x squared, and instead of plus 7x, I'm going to write plus 6x plus 1x, and then at the end, 2. So I replaced 7 with 1 and 6. It doesn't matter which way you write them. Okay, you could have wrote 1x plus 6x, and you will still get the same answer in the end. Okay, either way you write it, it will be the same in the end. So, step 5 now is to factor by grouping. Split it in half. Greatest common factor of 3x squared plus 6x is 3x. And what I'm left with is x plus 2. Greatest common factor of 1x plus 2 is 1. And what I'm left with is just x plus 2. So our common binomial matches, that's good. We have our greatest common factors out front. Those are going to join together. And then I have my common binomial after. So that's our final answer. Number 8, I don't see a b value in there. So if we don't see a number in front of a variable, say to yourself, what do we put in front? We put in front a 1. So our b value here is going to be 1. And then minus 12 at the end. Okay, so step 1, greatest common factor. There is no greatest common factor here, because the only numbers that can go into 6, 1, and 12 is 1. and we don't pull out a greatest common factor of 1 at this step. When we're grouping, like on step 5 of number 7, we did pull out a 1. But at the very beginning, we don't pull out a 1. So, moving on to step 2. Take your A, multiply it by, negative 12. We get our C was negative 12. Our A was 6. We get negative 72 as an answer. Okay. So step 3, we want to write down the factors of negative 72. What can I multiply to get negative 72? So remember, we're just really looking at what can I multiply to get 72. That negative in front tells me that one of those numbers will have to be negative. So what can I multiply to get 72? Well, I already know 6 and 12 gives me 72. That was in step 2. 1 and 72 can get me to 72. Okay, what about 2 and, let me think for a sec, 36. That can get me to 72. 3 and 24 gets me 72. 4 and 18 and 8 and 9. Yep, I have them all now. So these are all the possible combinations we can use to multiply to get to 72. So now I need to figure out which one of these combinations is going to combine to get 1. That's our B value. I cannot combine 6 and 12 in any way to get 1. I cannot combine 1 and 72, 2 and 36, 3 or 24, or 4 and 18. None of those combinations are going to give me 1 when I combine them. But 8 and 9 can. How can I get 1 out of 8 and 9? Well, this number is a positive number. That tells me that my bigger number out of this combination should be positive. So I should have a positive 9 and a negative 8. Okay. So 9 minus 8 is going to get me to that 1. That's it for step 3. Now we're on to step 4. Rewrite your trinomial. So instead of plus 1x in there, I'm going to write plus 9x minus 8x minus 12. So I've replaced 1 with 9x minus 8x. And then step 5, grouping. So cut it in half right in between those two. 6x squared plus 9x, the greatest common factor here is 3x. What I'm left with is 2x plus 3. The greatest common factor of negative 8x and negative 12, since that negative 8 is out front, my greatest common factor is negative. It's negative 4. So I have 2x plus 3. 2x plus 3, that's our common binomial. And then those numbers out front are our greatest common factors. They are going to join together into one set of parentheses. And then our common binomial at the end. That one was a little bit harder because 72 is such a big number. We have to try and remember what can I multiply to get to 72. If you don't remember your multiplication, if you don't know how can I get 72, go ahead and start dividing 72 by numbers. Like 72 divided by 2, 72 divided by 3, 72 divided by 4. That will tell you what two numbers you can use to get to 72. Okay, last two, number 9. First thing I want to do is highlight A, B, and C. step 1 after that. Sorry, guys. Find your greatest common factor. There is not a number that will go into 3, 14, and 8 other than 1. So, step 2. We want to multiply A and C. So 3 times 8, which is 24. Remember that 8 was the C from up above, and that 3 was the A from up above. That's it for step 2. Step 3. What are the factors of 24? Factors of 24. Well, we already know 3 and 8 works. 1 and 24, that'll work. Okay, remember this is if you don't know how to get 24, start dividing stuff. What's 24 divided by 2? 2 times 12 will give me 24. 24 divided by 3 we already know is 8, so 3 and 8 will give me 24. We have 4 and 6, and that's it. Okay. Part 2 of step 3 is to figure out which one of those combinations can I use to get negative 14. I cannot combine 3 and 8 to get negative 14 in any way. I can't do it with 1 and 24, but I can do it with 2 and 12. Okay. So to get negative 14 out of 2 and 12, okay, since our answer up above was positive 24, that tells me that either 2 and 12 have to both be positive or both be negative. Okay. I'll write that here. Since we have a positive 24 in step 2, that means that our factors are both positive or both negative. And in this case, because we have a negative here, they're both negative. So that means I have negative 12 and negative 2. That gives me negative 14. Okay. On example, let's say example 7, our step 2, we got a positive 6, so I know my factors are either both positive or both negative. Well, 7 was positive, so that means that these are both positive. On number 8, we had negative 72, so that told me that my factors, we had 1 positive and 1 negative. How do you know which one? Well, since 1 here was positive, that means the bigger number is positive. If that number was negative, our bigger number would be negative, like we saw in example 5. Sorry. So, I have my step 3 complete on number 9. We're moving on to step 4. Step 4 says to rewrite your trinomial. So we have 3x squared, but instead of negative 14x, I'm going to use negative 12x minus 2x, and then plus 8 at the end. So we're still replacing that negative 14 with negative 12 and negative 2. And moving on to final step 5, grouping. So cut it in half. The greatest common factor of 3x squared and negative 12x is 3x. And I'm left with x minus 4 in parentheses. The greatest common factor of negative 2x plus 8, since that negative 2 is out front, my greatest common factor is negative, and it's actually negative 2. And I'm left with x minus 4 in parentheses. We have our x minus 4 and our greatest common factors out front. Those two are going to combine, 3x minus 2, and then our common binomial, x minus 4. Okay, last one. we have negative 2y squared minus 5y minus 3. First thing, always go ahead and figure out a, b, and c. Okay. This one looks like it's going to be a lot different because I have y instead of x, but the only thing that changes is my answer is going to say y instead of x. So it doesn't change the process at all. All right. So step 1, look for, whoa, I don't know what just happened there. Step 1, look for your greatest common factor. There is no number other than 1, and in this case we could actually probably pull out a negative 1. Okay, so there's two ways you can do this. You can do it without pulling out a greatest common factor, or you could pull out a negative 1 as your greatest common factor and do it that way. I'm just going to say that there's not a greatest common factor here. Okay. Actually, I lied. You guys are probably like frustrated that I just changed that on us. We're going to pull out negative 1. Okay? Because that number out front, that a is negative, I'm going to pull out negative 1 as my greatest common factor just so that I can change these to be positive numbers instead of negative numbers. So negative 2 divided by negative 1 is 2y squared. Negative 5y divided by negative 1 is positive 5y. And then negative 3 divided by negative 1 is positive 3. Okay. So now I'm going to redo a, b, and c because I changed my polynomial a little bit. So now I've redone my a, b, and c. Moving on to step 2. Multiply a and c. So 2 times 3. When I multiply those together, I end up with 6. So remember that 3 was the c value, that 2 was the a value in our our first step, so in the parentheses. Step 3, we want to find the factors of 6. We already know 2 of them, 2 times 3, and we also can easily do 1 and 6, get 6 if I multiply those together. So I just need to figure out which of these combinations is going to combine to give me 5. Well, this is where that pattern I was kind of talking about last example comes in. Because 2 and 3, I can get 5 with 2 and 3, and I can get 5 with 1 and 6. But there's only one answer here. So I'm going to go back up to step 2 here, and I'm going to look at, is that number a positive or a negative? Okay. This answer is a positive, so that tells me that the factors that I'm going to pick are both positive or both negative. Okay. That helps narrow down my answer for number 3, because if I chose, let's say, 1 and 6, the only way I can get 5 out of 1 and 6 is to subtract 6 and 1. So I would have 6 minus 1 gives me 5. Well, that is 6 is a positive number and 1 would be a negative number. So that doesn't work for this. So in this case, 2 and 3 is the only one that works, because if I add 2 and 3 together, they're both positives. But if I added 1 and 6 together to make them both positive, then it would be 7, not 5. How do you know if it's both positive or both negative? 5 is positive, so these should both be positive numbers. Okay. So 2 plus 3 equals 5. That's what we're looking for here. So step 4, rewrite your trinomial. That greatest common factor from number 1 is still out front, negative 1. And then instead of minus 5y, I'm going to write plus 2y plus 3y. Plus 5y plus 3. Okay. Move into step 5. Ignore that -1 for a minute. It's going to jump down to be part of our answer, but when I do my grouping, I'm just worried about what's in parentheses. So I split it in half. 2y squared plus 2y, the greatest common factor here is 2y. And I have y plus 1 left over. And then at the end we have 3y plus 3, the greatest common factor is 3, with y plus 1 left over. That y plus 1 is our common binomial. Whoops. Our 2y and 3 are the greatest common factors for our grouping. So my final answer, 2y plus 3, y plus 1, and then that -1 can jump out front. Okay. If we did not pull out -1, that would have just changed one of our binomials in our final answer to be negative. Okay, so if we did not pull out -1 at the very beginning, our answer would be, one of our binomials would be negative, and that would be the only difference there. Okay, but we did pull out the -1, so our answers were both positive in our parentheses. That's it for factoring standard